And
We still
of
need
course,
like a title card with a countdown.
yeah, I'll figure it out. Of course, my camera stops working right as I like shift around. So the first thing everyone gets to see is me like, there we go. All right, ready to go.
Welcome to With Thunderous Applause, a podcast where two friends discuss the ideas that will shape our uncertain future. I am your host, Steve, along with my co-host and producer, Zach. How you doing, buddy?
Doing pretty good. Just got a short education on septic.
Yeah, while we were finishing up the prep for the show, we're getting started a little late today. We were just talking about the myth of the flushable baby wipe.
No such thing.
No such thing. And how I care for my septic tank by not using a lot of toilet bowl cleaners. I really minimize my use of toilet bowl cleaners.
A lot of
Bacterial stuff.
antimicrobial stuff there. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I also have some stuff called BioClean, which is basically just like a probiotic powder that's designed.
Yeah.
It's just species of bacteria that help break down solids, and you can use that, and it coats your pipes and helps like cut down on grease building up and other things like that. So
There you
that
go.
eventually makes it
We
into the
did
septic
talk
tank.
about poo live. So.
Talking about poo and septic tanks. But yeah, so they don't have to be if you care for them properly, they don't have to be cleaned all that often. And it also depends on the size of your family. They size the tank for your room or number of rooms in the house. But
Gotcha.
generally, we don't have, 6, 7, 8 people living in the house. So
yeah,
we don't fill it up that quick. Anyway, we're not here to talk about that. We are finally getting to our episode where we discuss Andor, which is a Star Wars show. I've heard it referred to as a cross between a political thriller and a crime drama.
that's pretty good. Yeah.
You
I
say
mean,
it's
there is
accurate.
certainly the crime drama aspect to it. Yeah.
Available on DisneyPlus. Highly recommend you check it out.
Watch it.
Subscribe to DisneyPlus and watch it. So we did have kind of like, I think, a mid-season check-in about it, and we're going to kind of touch on some of those, but we tried to not like rehash everything we already said.
Mm-hmm.
Overall impression of the show once you finished.
Overall positive. I had no idea they were going to go for more than one season, so I was surprised by that. I do like a lot of the topics that were touched upon. I think for a lot of people who might not get involved too much with politics and actual like crime and like what happens to you when you're a criminal, this might be a little bit of an education. Uh, at the very end, we'll touch on a scene that is very representative of how life actually goes when you're a criminal and you're not given the benefit of a doubt, due to whatever circumstance might give you a benefit of a doubt.
Or you don't even have to be a criminal, right?
True. Yes.
So one of the reasons that we wanted to do this particular show is because, like, so obviously people who are into Star Wars, like, there's a lot of criticism for how Disney as a company and Lucasfilm under their leadership mismanaged the sequel trilogy. That's kind of beyond the scope of what we want to discuss today.
Yeah, we're not going to dredge that up.
Not going to dredge it up. Although I will admit I was supposed to be rewatching Andor so that it was fresher in my mind. I've seen it twice now. I was going to watch it again to refresh my memory, and instead I watched like a couple X-Men movies I hadn't seen, and also it's fucking garbage. Why? Because I have a Disney Plus subscription, and my partner's out of town, and my kids are out of town, and like
you got to make use of it.
Yeah, and I'm just like, fuck it, I'm falling asleep. What do we want to do? I don't know. I liked the actress that played Sansa Stark in Game of Thrones.
Oh yeah,
and she plays Jean Grey in some of the newer ones.
Yep.
So I wanted to watch those.
Yeah.
She's fucking gorgeous, and she's a good actress.
Yeah. Hey, and I watched A Christmas Horror Story. So if you ever want to see elves turn into zombies, It's an older movie. I think it's like
Oh, it's like one of
2006.
those 80s B horror movies.
No. It was. I mean, it's pretty good quality, but it's older. It has it's pretty interesting. It has William Shatner as a radio host who's kind of like, he's in between scenes of like an anthology of horror, that is all happening at the same time in the little town they're in. Pretty cool. I liked it.
Interesting. Yeah. And then last night I turned on relevant to what we were saying before. Last night I was like, well, fuck, I really don't feel like watching another X-Men movie because they all kind of feel the same. And so instead I started watching The Last Jedi again because I love that movie. We're not going to dredge it up and rehash.
Started watching The Last Jedi again.
I'm just
because it's
saying
not
it
the
so that
rise
we
of
get hate
Palpatine.
comments to boost us in the algorithm.
Hey, man. Hate attention is attention.
Yeah, no, seriously though. So one of the things about the Star Wars under Disney that's been like a constant refrain. So there's this kind of like critique of the fan base saying that they're toxic and they're racist and sexist and homophobic. And unfortunately, the reality and the response to that is, oh, you're just trying to shut us down when we have legitimate critiques.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem is that generally a legitimate critique either also contains something sexist or homophobic or racist, or it's side by side with something racist, sexist, and homophobic. And so when they say, hey, you're being racist, stop harassing whatever her name was, Moses Ingram, for her Reva character in Obi-Wan Kenobi, for example.
Yeah.
When
there was some in that too.
People being fucking racist.
Yeah.
And we should call out those people. But then this, like, what do you call it? Basically this kind of right-wing intelligentsia that has a lot of exposure due to technological changes, social media, right. YouTube. They'll take that and show how Disney's woke because they can't even like take criticism, and they'll just use like the claim that everybody say that criticizing their shows is racist when like the racism actually does exist. Even if the critiques are valid, the racism is not valid, if that makes sense.
Yeah, mostly.
So one of these things that constantly comes up in comment threads, and I watch probably far too much YouTube about Star Wars. You not so much, right?
No, it's a very unhealthy sphere to be in.
Yeah.
I mean, well, you started off with everyone's. Yeah. Well, like I was totally unaware that people were against Rose or whatever. What was that her name in the movie?
Rose Tico. Yeah. In The Last Jedi.
I was totally unaware. Didn't care for the character just because I don't think they developed her enough. And so I was like, why is she even in this? And why should I care? But like, that was it. That was the extent of mine. It's just like, they didn't give her enough screen time. Like all of her interactions seem unnatural. So I don't care about her. And then I found out like all the hate that she was given. And I was just like, okay, guys.
Oh yeah.
Whoa.
She took a lot.
Yeah. And it's just like, I don't see the need for that. Like, you can think the character's bad or whatever, but it's not the actor's fault. They're given lie. I mean, are we really going to hate on fucking Hayden Christensen for his sand diatribe? Like, dude, we should.
Not just that, which was grotesquely bad writing.
Yeah.
Even when the writing was better, he's not a good actor.
Yeah.
He's not.
And so, like, maybe we need to give equal hate to some other actors, or just
And remember, Jar Jar
don't hate
Binks
and make your own. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, Jar Jar Binks was played by a African man, I want to say, with the little motion capture dots or whatever.
Yeah.
And he also like was driven, like basically no longer wanted to be in film or have anything to do with it.
Same thing happened to the kid who played young Anakin. The guy who played young Anakin, he just dropped off. He didn't want to do it anymore because he got so much like hate mail and everything. So
so this isn't a new problem, but it's difficult to visit or to watch any show or like commentary on Star Wars without people dropping racist, homophobic, sexist stuff into comments, especially about Kathleen Kennedy, who's like the president or whatever, the chief executive of Lucasfilm, that particular division of Disney. Despite you can't really reason with people, you're like, she's like an executive producer. Like, she probably spends more time talking to attorneys to approve the contract for the company that provides the food on set than she does like making creative decisions. Like,
she's got to make sure craft services is on par.
I mean, I'm sure she participates in, or she's present in some of those meetings, right?
Yeah.
But she's not actively like pushing, and that's what you get so much. Oh, the problem with Star Wars is they put a woman in charge and they want to have women lead actors. And I've literally seen comments like women don't belong anywhere near Star Wars, which is just fucking insane to me.
Yeah, well, especially given like it's not Star Wars. Science fiction has always been a medium by which you veil reality in a thin, veneer of fiction, and then critique the shit out of reality.
Yeah.
And so to see, people, say that it's bad to have a woman in charge, and it's like that is exactly the sort of thing we should be going for, because women aren't normally going to be in charge of that. And science fiction is the perfect place to have that. Like so many early episodes of Star Trek got flack for having interracial aspects to them, and so like, but then they wouldn't get critiqued for like outright calling capitalism bullshit. It's like, okay, like you can question capitalism and kind of promote socialism because Star Wars existed, or Star Trek existed in a future where we gotten past money, but you damn well cannot have Shatner kissing
What's her name?
Yeah, I can't remember her name, but yeah.
Yeah, no, and I'm aware of that kind of how groundbreaking that was to have a black woman and a white man kiss on TV, on primetime TV.
Yeah, but it's just so interesting that you can like set aside your connection to reality for one thing, but not for the other.
Yeah, for sure. And I think in this case, and kind of my hypothesis is after Andor, and that's kind of the thread that ties this all together today, is that like all the claims of woke, all the claims that Kathleen Kennedy was garbage and nothing could good, all of that was just people could not wrap their heads around bad writing. And fans, unfortunately, this is why I like The Last Jedi when most people say that's the worst film ever made in Star Wars. Because they come in with expectations. That's why when The Mandalorian season 2 last episode had Luke Skywalker come and cut through all the Death Troopers, like every fucking fanboy that hated The Last Jedi just had a raging fucking boner for that, because that's what they wanted the sequel trilogy to be, which was like uber powerful superhuman Luke just like pulling Star Destroyers out of the sky like he does in some of the novels and shit. And so because they didn't get the service they wanted, they didn't get the story that they wanted.
Yeah.
They directed their ire towards, oh, it's just because Disney doesn't care about these legacy characters. They just want to have women kissing on screen, and they want to put brown women in positions. That's why Rose Tico got, Tran, I think her last name, Tran. Yeah. I forget her full name, but the actress that plays Rose Tico just got berated on and had to basically like quit being in internet spaces altogether.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, I would argue that is absolutely not what the fans wanted. They only think they want it. And I base my argument upon the Matrix, I guess now quadrilogy, because the first one was great because it was him developing his power. The second one was less great because he was incredibly powerful, but still had things that challenged him. And then in like the third and the fourth, he's just this like magical superhero who can solve all problems. And it's hard to maintain an interest in it at that point. Like when the protagonist can just do whatever he wants and reshape reality in any way necessary. It's just kind of tedious at that point. It's similar to my opinion when I was a kid, was like, oh man, Final Fantasy, I love it. I wish the story could continue forever. And then like, MMOs came out and it was in a live world where the story kept on forever. And it turns out that's kind of boring after a while. Like you can only face so many life-threatening, world, destroying events before everything's trivial and uninteresting.
Yeah, and I've maintained from the beginning, especially in trying to counter critiques of things like the sequel trilogy, although it's fucking terrible writing and there was no continuity. I'm not defending it at
No.
all, but especially when it comes to like people's complaint that they wanted Luke to just be fucking awesome and cut through like all these. I'm like, if I wanted to watch fucking superhero movies, I'd watch superhero movies.
Well, and where's the conflict in that movie? There is no story if there's no conflict. If just Luke Skywalker shows up and murders everyone bad, like, well, what's the fucking point of the movie?
Right. And again, it was poorly handled. I'm not going to say that the writing was good, because it fucking was god awful, as we've discussed offline before about how awful the last one was. But the point is that I think people took what they perceived, like you can intuit, like this is really poorly written.
Mm-hmm.
And poorly managed. I'm not going to deny that it was poorly managed, especially with the continuity between the three films, which has to transcend the creative team of the film to do a trilogy like that.
Yep.
If you want to have it like work together. But they took that critique and instead just started claiming that Disney was woke because you had these right-wing ideologues and pontificators in media spaces telling people the problem with this is because they had two women kissing at the end of The Last Jedi, or I guess maybe it was the last movie, Rise of Skywalker. I don't recall, because to me it wasn't interesting.
I don't remember it because it's so uneventful.
Yeah, it's so uneventful, but like, that's what they really focus on. I've seen stuff like the problem was like Rey was super overpowered and Luke was emasculated. They use that word a lot. Basically, he wasn't manly enough. And like that fits into a lot of what we've talked about on this channel about fascism and how fascist ideology just can permeate like unknown and unseen into all these spaces. And that's exactly what I feel was happening in the Star Wars fandom.
Oh yeah, I mean, at that point, you're making a strongman argument. You're saying that you have to have this strong, in this case, male leader, and if he's not, then it's not a good story, I guess, in their mind. That seems like crap.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. But I think ultimately what's interesting is that for everybody, when was The Last Jedi released? 2016?
Yeah, I think so. Let me see. 2017.
27?
Yeah.
Pardon me, 2017. Okay. Yeah. What is that, 5 years ago? Yeah.
Now it is. Yeah. Jesus.
Yeah. So The Last Jedi came out 5 years ago. And pretty much since then, it's been, because it had none of the member berries of the first one, right? The Force Awakens is not a good movie. But people liked it because it did. I mean, South Park did an entire season of South Park was focused on that concept of like the member berries, and like how it's not just Star Wars, but in all media, they like redid Dirty Dancing and they redid Red Dawn and they redid all this, and Disney's like live action Aladdin, live action Lion King, right?
Entire cinematic universes like that aren't necessarily unoriginal per movie, but the setting is unoriginal.
Right.
And you'll notice that in a lot of the Marvel Cinematic Universe movies is that the world building isn't all that strong. It's more character based, and how many jokes per minute can you fit in?
Right. And about Easter eggs. And I did see something about Andor, which is like the internet is skeptical about it because like it doesn't fit the the model that feeds this like entire industry of people who just dissect and tell you all the Easter eggs and how it all connects, right?
Ah,
So for everybody complaining um, instead of critiquing the writing and management issues, et cetera, and so forth, they just kind of leaned into this like, oh, it's woke. It's woke Disney. Cancel your subscription. Don't watch any Star Wars, even though you've been a fan, because
right.
they're just trying to push their agenda, right? And you get this kind of drumming of moral panic, especially around schools, right?
Mhm.
And it ebbs and flows. You have like right wing media being like, oh, they're indoctrinating your kids. Like that's what the whole shit about like critical race theory, right? Like even
Right,
though
right.
no one talking about it actually understands what the fuck it means.
Why don't we talk about how religion is indoctrinating your children?
But that's not the point because that's the good kind of indoctrination
Oh, okay. My mistake. My
because
mistake.
it
I didn't know there were good types and bad
it
types.
feeds authoritarianism because there's a
Yeah.
big the Sky Daddy,
Yeah.
and you just
Santa
follow
Claus?
do what Sky Daddy says, and everything's fucking fine, right? So it
Yeah.
feeds in it reinforces the kind of way our brains are wired to want like authoritarian figures.
God's a
Um,
dom.
God is a dom. Is that what you said?
God is a dom.
He's like, lick these boots, my child, or whatever. I don't know. But it's interesting that like the critique of wokeness, people who are like diehard Star Wars fans, then see Andor and are like, "Oh my god, this is fucking amazing! Disney
Yeah.
wasn't pushing its agenda." And the point I wanted to make with this video, and I
Mhm.
think in the conversation we're gonna have, or that we're in the process of having, is it like Andor is by far the most fucking woke Star Wars that's ever been made.
Mhm.
Um,
And we gonna cover
and
that.
we're gonna cover that. But first, we have to define what is meant by woke. Obviously, it originally, and there's a bunch of stuff you can find. I like Revolutionary Blackout Network had a conversation about it a number of weeks ago. But it was hard to find a coherent clip to pull out of that and
Right,
use.
right.
So I didn't use it, but they're awesome. Check them out. But ultimately, it came from like Black culture and about
Yeah.
being aware of how the system and other individuals, white supremacy especially, attack you and how you're vulnerable to it. And being woke is like literally being aware of how the system affects you so that you
Right.
can protect yourself.
And of course, as with all things, white people eventually stole it and used it for their own purposes.
Yeah, I think it got. My understanding is that it came back into use. It was something that was used during the civil rights movement and
Yeah.
even before then, or the early civil rights movement through what we commonly know as the civil rights movement, right in the early '60s,
Mhm.
and then I think Black Lives Matter
Right.
movement and various individuals involved like um, uh, popularized it, I guess.
Reinvigorated it. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
reinvigorated is a good
Yeah,
way.
and you're absolutely correct about that. And then ever since then, of course, since the right doesn't like that movement, they have tried to, weaken it, strawman it, and turn it into a or a pejorative. So
Absolutely.
yeah,
And that's exactly the way it's been used in circles discussing Star Wars is always as a negative.
yeah,
Oh, it's woke. It has an agenda. And I'm sorry, but like film is fucking propaganda.
yeah. Oh yeah,
It
it
always, I mean,
has been since its creation.
when you talk about American power projected across the globe, right? Like one of the components of American power is like cultural power. And how do
Yeah,
we have cultural power? Hollywood.
yeah,
People want to see our movies and they
right.
want to wear the jeans that are, featured in those movies or whatever else. And it's this kind of like the things we produce here, people want as a status symbol or for whatever else. But that actually gives the United States as an imperial power. It gives it its power.
One of the more interesting things our fans might not know is that if you ever see someone in a movie using an Apple product, they are a good guy. You don't have to question it ever. Apple has come
Really,
out and said that we will not allow our products to be used in movies unless they're used by good guys. So if someone's using an
really.
Apple laptop or something like that, you know that no matter how the story might be trying to portray them as like ambiguous alignment, they're a good guy. Yeah. it kind
Yeah.
of
But I
ruins a
mean,
lot of
it was
movies.
always been propaganda from the very beginning. In
Yeah.
fact, I mean, like Westerns, do you think that like that maybe like the Western genre was so popular in the 50s because like that's when our empire was expanding the most? And
Yeah.
so telling stories about victorious imperialists.
What crack shots Americans were, like I have heard in history classes about how the main difference between like American troops in World War I and World War II and European troops was that American troops were sharpshooters, as opposed to just getting a whole bunch of people in a line and firing. They were getting these like long shot kills and everything, and it's just glorifying the American history of the past and everything. It's like, is it true? Probably not.
Yeah, and
You
that's
know?
also how you get like look at like early popular film, right? Because most people didn't have fucking TVs
Mhm.
until what, the 60s.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Late
and so
50s.
like you'd only go to the movies, but like after World War II, like all sorts of popular movies about how we're American soldiers are so brave and this, that, and the other thing. And you don't get a movie, like I'm not a film expert, so there were
Mhm.
probably other films, but in terms of popular film, like you didn't get like a real kind of raw look at war until like it was always about heroics, right? You didn't really get a
Yeah,
raw
yeah.
look until some movies like Das Boat or Stalingrad or Full Metal Jacket or
Ooh, that was a good one.
yeah, some other movies like that, right? Like where you actually kind of get into like some fucking heavy shit, right? Like, I mean, I guess the Dirty Dozen, there was some other stuff, but like a lot of it, I'm thinking like the John Wayne World War II movies that they made, like they were producing one every 3 months
Yeah.
or something.
It's hard to
And
keep recruitment numbers up if people are afraid to go to war.
well, I mean, the draft was still in effect at that point too,
Yeah.
when those were all made, because the draft wasn't ended after World War II until Vietnam.
Yeah.
Um,
God damn.
because everybody was getting drafted into at least the National Guard even during the Korean conflict and stuff. So,
Yep.
anyway, the point being is that yes, film is propaganda. So to say it has an agenda is not necessarily incorrect, but also to say its agenda is to somehow like make men lesser and push like some fucking cabal of like women empowerment and shove that in our faces is just, to me, kind of ridiculous.
Yeah.
So we get to the concept of woke itself, which I
Yep.
think we're going to have Lead Belly. This was in the 30s, I think, right?
Yes, indeed. He was cited as the first person to use the term in popular media.
Yeah, and ultimately, what is it? Woke, awoke.
Yeah.
I've heard awoke too.
Yeah.
It's basically it's just poor people, dialect, right? When they don't pronounce something correctly or whatever. So,
Yep.
that's where it comes from. Let's listen.
Yeah. 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 And this is an interview that he did, and he played a song, and this is the outro to his interview.
Right.
Well, you see them boys now with them white women, that was the trouble about it. Then they went out and made some loud cry about the boys being there with the women, you see. That is all it was to it. They just saw the women. They didn't see nothing else wrong. But anyhow, they put the boys in jail, and it's been that 6 long years. Well, the state, all the whole United States got together, and they got out 4 of them. They come to New York, and the lawyer what got him out, I know him pretty good. I've met him. And he showed me the Scottsboro boys, and I shake hands with them. So I made this little song about down there. So I advise everybody to be a little careful when they go along through that, but stay woke, keep their eyes open.
And that was the original meaning. It was just
They will
keep your head on a swivel. Watch out for those white folks.
Yeah, and that's what he's saying in earlier in that interview. That's part of the Folkways collection. Earlier in the interview that we didn't play, and you check it out. It's in the show notes, right?
Yep. Always
He's
is.
just talking about like how fucking Alabama was particularly awful.
Yep.
And some people saw black men with white women and went and told authorities that there was obviously something criminal going on, and that
So they called 911
white women because they were together.
Yep.
And that was the time period. It's like, I mean, lucky for them, given what we know
Oh yeah.
of the Black experience,
Well,
even today, like lucky for them, they had a kangaroo trial and were convicted and all that stuff and could appeal it, or whatnot, instead of just like being lynched, because that was ultimately like the
that was still a
more
thing.
common than getting arrested and tried, right?
Right.
So anyway, yeah, stay woke. Keep your eyes open.
Keep your head
Be
on a
aware
swivel.
of your surroundings and how you're vulnerable to the system.
And more widely now, as it is used today, it is to illustrate differences in class and economic stature. So don't think that you're immune to it, just because your skin is pale.
Yeah, and there's a whole part of the discussion, I think, beyond this, because I do want to talk about Andor.
Yeah.
That like it does get misused by the professional managerial class and the kind of like petite bourgeoisie among the like liberals, basically, right? Like
Mhm.
where they completely misuse it and they're not examining or being aware of and staying vigilant to oppressive systems or to abuses of power, et cetera, so forth. And they really do kind of push um kind of identity politics,
Mhm.
and use woke as that. But like right-wing media that finds like one random fucking college student at some liberal arts school with pink hair that's like upset about something and then parade that as if like everybody that like is adjacent to them politically is the same as them
Right.
is really disingenuous. And it's just part of the othering, right, that's required to keep us
Right.
divided rather than united in class interests.
And it's an easy target and a commonly used tool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like we're rambling a little bit.
We might be.
Let's move forward.
I asked someone how they felt about white people trying to use hip language. He said, man, they blew the gig just by being grey. Barry Beckham's 1972 play Garvey Lives contains the lines, "No, I won't go to sleep, I won't, I've been sleeping all my life, and now that Mr. Garvey done wake me up, I'm gonna stay woke." And in the middle of the 20th century, the psychiatrist and philosopher Frantz Fanon wrote extensively about black and colonised consciousness and identity. For most of the 20th century, though, it was a marginal word. It only gained wider currency in the outrage over the shooting of Michael Brown by a police officer in 2014. It was quickly adopted by Black Lives Matter's protesters as a reminder to be aware of police injustice. At its simplest then, the term woke has been used to encourage political awareness of injustice, to wake up to social issues that are otherwise and previously hidden, especially with regards to racial justice. But the term was quickly co-opted by the right and turned into a term of derision. The wokerati, the woke mob, and cancel culture were, in the eyes of many, a loud, misguided movement determined to silence their ideological enemies. At that moment, the way woke was used slipped neatly into another lineage: political correctness.
Right. And kind of like I said, that these things like repeat themselves. There you go. Like, do you remember that? What's one of the first movies that MTV made under their internal
Movies?
film house?
I have no idea.
Yeah, I think they were mostly in the production side, in terms of like distribution and funding.
Was it Beavis and Butthead Do America?
No, it was called PCU. And technically, the college was Port Chester University. Port
Okay.
Chester, I think, is in Connecticut, like real near New York City.
Okay.
But the whole joke was politically correct university, right?
Right.
So they
right.
just took these kind of stereotypes of political correctness and then just wove them into a story about. Yeah, it's interesting. Check it out. It's a fucking comedy, and it's pretty funny. But there's one where like, they're satirizing like the angry college feminist or whatever. And they're
Of
at a
course.
party, and this guy's like, hey, you guys want a beer? And then like her reaction is like, no, I will not get naked for you, or whatever it was. And then the person next to her is like, calm down. I think he's like, and then they talk to him like he's a fucking child. It's like, yes, we would like a beer. Thank you. It's just fucking, because that's the right. They're just kind of poking fun at that extreme political correctness. And so it's been around for a long time. Go ahead.
Well, and it is interesting, that they point that out. Like you already have a political correctness which has been painted as a negative by the right, and so all they had to do was just bring those two ideas into proximity, and now you've immediately discredited wokeness, because it is the same as political correctness, and so we've already as the right disproven that that's a good thing. So problem solved. They didn't even have to do much work. They just had to call them parallels and then move on with their lives, and then just start being derisive towards anyone who disagrees with them.
Yeah, we might have to have a conversation about political correctness, because like I definitely kind of agree with some critiques that are like it's a little extreme.
Yeah, I mean everything goes too far in politics. You can always course correction, I think is what it is there's too many hands on the wheel, and so it goes over a certain thing and you're trying to bring it back down, but a bunch of people want to keep going, and eventually you get it back to sanity.
Yeah, and I'm not even sure how much of that is like fabricated, right? Like people were like outraged, but like, is it just that people are like, oh, look at all these angry woke people that are mad about Dave, a comedian, telling a joke, right? Or is it that a handful of people were genuinely upset, which is fucking normal because we're all going to react differently, right? And that those individuals in their critique got like all of the focus, and you ignored like the vast majority of people who also believe in things like trans rights, right? And also don't believe in hitting women. They can also just be like, well, it's a fucking joke. Like, I don't have to love the joke or love where the joke comes from, but like you can also not be upset by it, right?
Yeah. And then no, I had it, it's gone.
Yeah, I guess I'm just saying that like I think a lot of this response, like that's a cultural phenomena, right? This image of the people on their Trump boats and all that, and the way that, like you said, wokerati, right? They just kind of like, it just becomes a summary term for something they've been critical of forever, which is people saying, hey, if you're fucking sexist or racist, like I'm going to call you out. And then they get defensive and be like, you're just trying to be politically correct. And it's like, no, we're just trying to make a fucking space where our language matters, and saying shit like that has the potential to hurt people. So maybe we should refrain from that. Right? Like,
yeah. Well, and it seems like it really is just a pushback against changing things to make life even a little bit better for certain people. Any times we'd like to just make life a tiny iota nicer. You have some people that just don't want that, because in their mind life is a zero-sum game. If someone else gains something, they're going to lose something. And so if someone gets a little bit of respect, that naturally means that they're going to lose a little amount of respect. That person starts talking. Media, which we've talked about in the past being outrage based, grabs onto those loud voices, amplifies them, and then suddenly there's this movement where there isn't one. Like, for the most part, things you see on the media where there's a bunch of like loud, angry people, it's literally just those three people that you see talking on screen. Like, nobody else really cares all that much. Showing that people don't care too much about something doesn't get eyeballs or clicks or whatever. And so you have to focus on the people that are outraged. And so, I mean,
so there is a kind of a confirmation bias going on. And that's kind of my point. And unfortunately, when we come to talking about Star Wars, it is to say that that's all that's being said is incorrect. There is a confirmation bias there, but it does, like, the sexist, homophobic, racist stuff does exist in sufficient quantity to say it's a problem.
It's
But
so
I
weird.
agree with, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say it's so weird that it makes its way into a world with like aliens and androgynous, species, and like species with 27 different sexes and shit like that. Like, it doesn't fit here, guys.
Yeah, there was actually a complaint early on that they thought, like, some people were like, before really Andor got going, and they were like, oh shit, no, this is good, I understand it now. But their initial reaction was like, a red light district and a brothel,
Yeah.
that's a little risque. And I was like, bro, did you ever see Solo? Like,
Yeah.
they definitely allude to the fact that, like, Lando is pansexual, like, throughout the whole thing.
Right.
And that's not necessarily like wokeness. Like, it's fairly true to the character as we understand him. I think we made this joke before about how there was always a question all the way back from Empire Strikes Back. People were like, what's up with Lobot? Is that like a sex slave kind of thing going on?
Rub his bald head.
I mean, I have a book called Good Night, Darth Vader, I want to say. It's one of the books I read to the kids the most because it's just rad. But like, there's a line in there where it's like, Lando and Lobot lie peacefully sleeping, and like they're in separate beds, but it's Lando and Lobot in the same room.
You just push those beds together.
And Lobot is just kind of an obscure character to be including in one with like Darth Maul and Jar Jar Binks and Amidala and all that, right? Like, it's just like, Lobot, who the fuck is right. But they're sleeping in the same room.
The administrator, I see.
Yeah. So anyway, like, but they alluded in that movie about him having sex with his droid, like, straight up. Like,
yeah.
And Emilia Clarke's character, what was her name? The female Crime Lord person?
Yeah. She was definitely sold into prostitution.
Yeah. But like, she asked the droid, she's like, how does that work? And the droid's like, oh, it works.
Yeah.
Come on, dude. Like, you can't say a red light district is risque.
Yeah.
Especially when, like, George Lucas straight up said there's no bras in space, and like forced Carrie Fisher to like be braless in all those scenes so that I don't know, look at titties or whatever through a shirt. I don't know. I don't get it now, but maybe that was kind of like back in the day when all you had was like Sears catalog, or like lingerie models in a Sears catalog to get you fucking off, right? Like,
yeah, that's true. Just watching those 6 scenes over and over again, wearing out the film.
Yeah, the gold bikini, which is just awesome. And people are like, oh, you need to have all these black protagonists. You even forget that like Lando Calrissian was in like the original trilogy. It's like their treatment of fucking Lando is racist as shit, bro. Like, going back and looking at like Lando from the original trilogy, he just kind of plays like a stereotypical. Am I way off in that?
No, I mean, I think he might even.
Oh, hello.
Might even fall under the magical black character, who basically seems like he's going to solve all of the protagonist problems for them.
Yeah, they definitely had some kind of like some vibes around him that seemed like he was stereotyped as like kind of the womanizer and this, that, and the other thing.
Oh yeah, and then you had to worry about your women around him and everything. Yeah.
If you just see him as like oversexed is like his whole fucking thing.
Yeah.
And then you're like, okay, it's not because he's black, it's because he's just like wants to fuck everything.
He's just paying attention to Leia because she's new. He's already had Han.
Right? Exactly. What about Chewbacca? Have you ever shaved a Wookiee? Okay. At any rate, let's keep going.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, nice to meet you, Luke Skywalker. You have a pretty mouth.
Everybody. The more ideas there are in circulation, the more ideas there are for any individual to disagree with. More media always means more arguing. The result is simple and inevitable. More than ever, wading into the public sphere and making a public argument, especially on a controversial topic that affects people's lives, takes an extra layer of courage and an even thicker skin. And that's great. It should encourage stronger arguments. You better have your points in order if you're going to make a public case to a passionate crowd on a controversial issue. You should expect pushback. You should know you're going to face fire, invoke emotion of some kind. That's courage. Courage isn't whining, moaning, and protesting that things didn't go your way. Courage isn't comparing an organisation not wanting to associate with you with being burned at the stake or sent to the gulag. The risk of rejection, the possibility of causing offence, is the price of admission to be able to broadcast your own opinions onto a stage of millions in a broadened, lively public sphere.
Bam.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, the day we start getting, hate messages, the day we know we've made it.
Made it. So why did I put this in? Because one of the chief pieces of evidence for Disney being broke because it's woke, is Gina Carano getting fired from The Mandalorian. Do you remember that going down?
Yeah, she had a bunch of Twitter posts, anti-Semitic, I believe, and
right. Go ahead, finish it.
I don't know. I was just going to say, and eventually she got fired because Disney was tired of dealing with it.
Right. And they were just like, dude, we can't deal with this. So a lot of people say, oh, it's the fucking pro-trans agenda. They're forcing this. They're like people that claim that like little kids are getting like genital surgery and stuff.
Right.
Which like,
I met one of those.
I think it would be wrong if it happened. I don't think it actually happens. And in the one or two cases where it might have happened, there could be a legitimate medical reason for it, right? Like, I don't know. I'm not a fucking doctor or a parent in that situation. So frankly, it's none of my fucking business, right?
Well, I mean, the thing is, we've been doing that forcibly for a very long time. Well, not just that, but we've had people who came out of the womb as hermaphroditic, and we said, boy, you're a boy from here on out, or you're a girl from here on out, and just made that decision for them with no consultation typically to the parents. It was just, of course they want a boy. So we'll do our best. I
mean,
here we are pissed about it.
And the thing is, so they thought that it was because, like, I guess, like, Gina Carano, like, people were like, why don't you use your pronouns in your Twitter profile? Which I also think is fucking ridiculous. If someone doesn't want to put up their pronouns or doesn't feel compelled to, I don't think you should be able to compel them.
But at the same time, they shouldn't be too upset when you misidentify them.
Yeah, precisely. If you don't want to be misidentified and there might be a question, like you prefer to be called they instead of she or he, like, then by all means put your gender, your pronouns, your preferred pronouns up. But if you don't put them up, you're right. All you're doing is saying, like, if you get misgendered, it's nobody's fault.
Yeah.
Right. But it's also an asshole move if someone does identify which pronouns they want and then you intentionally use the wrong ones. Right. You dead name or whatever. It's fucked up. But the point I wanted to make is that everybody, like, there was a lot of people, I don't want to say everybody, that were like, oh, look, Disney doesn't like that she has an opinion that differs from, like, the woke, puritanical woke position of you have to support trans people or whatever. The reality is that it was when she got into the realm of, I feel like, I imagine this is how, the Holocaust happened, is like people coming and criticizing me for my personal beliefs. That was the line she crossed.
Right.
Is we should know everywhere, if you just watch the machinations of Congress, is you cannot ever dare compare anything to the Holocaust, and you can't be critical of Israel because of the Holocaust, etc., so forth, right? So the line she crossed was not putting, I think she put beep, boop, beep, or something like that, like a droid or whatever, as her pronouns, because people kept pushing her, and she's like, fine, fuck it, you want me to put something there? Beep, boop, beep, right? Which I could see being perceived as insensitive.
Yeah.
But like this clip, that's the purpose of showing that second part of that now, then and now clip.
Yes.
Is it when you're in the public sphere, like, it's easy for people to be mad at you, and you just need to be like, I don't care. It's not my thing. Or just go silent for a while, and people have short attention spans, and they'll fucking forget about it. But as soon as you're like, I feel like a Jew during the Holocaust. Like
Yeah.
Disney, for those who don't know, Walt Disney, the founder of that company, was a rabid anti-Semite.
Oh yeah.
And
Plenty
it's
of evidence
well
for it.
known that he worked with Nazis and had sympathies towards the extermination of the Jewish people. A lot of people don't know either that the resurgence of the Ku Klux Klan in the 20th century happened in Anaheim. Where is fucking Disneyland, Disney original headquarters? I don't know where they are now.
No,
It was in Anaheim. And it was mostly anti-Catholic and anti-Jew, because there were a lot of like Italians and Spanish people and
right.
Mexicans and other colonized peoples coming north into California who were Catholic, and it was also the Jews, right? And so the Ku Klux, the KKK's resurgence happened in California, not a particular progressive place, as people claim.
Everyone thinks it is, but
Walt
only
Disney
parts.
was at the center of like Semitism and propagating that. So much so, I think Family Guy did a joke where they were like, they went to like a Disney multiverse. Do you remember that one?
The one I remember was just a very short one where they like, talk about him being frozen and they wake him up and he's like, "Are the Jews dead? No. Wake me up later."
Oh, this is Walt Disney said this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, this is there's like a multiverse thing that Stewie created, and they're going to various realms in the multiverse or whatever. One of them is which is the dogs and humans switch places.
Yeah.
So Stewie shits on the ground just so Brian has to pick it up. That's the gag.
Pick up my poo.
And then there's another one where they go to like a Disney Fantasyland, and it's much like Snow White when all the like animals are helping her clean up.
Yeah.
And then the what is the red fro guy in the show called
Mortimer or Mortimer.
Yeah, something like
that.
Yeah.
It's been so long since I watched the show.
Yeah, same here. But I just remember that because like it was like, oh, the Disney creatures and it's a perfect world. And then knock, knock, knock. They open the door and it's a Jew and they all like get like bloodthirsty and shit.
Yeah.
It's fucked up, but it's also true that Disney was founded there. So they're gonna push back maybe or not have a very low tolerance.
Try to clean
that
up
kind
their
of
image a little bit, I mean, they did make Song of the South and they'd like us all to forget they did that.
They've done a lot of fucked up shit.
Yeah.
And so canning Gina Carano did not have to do with her opinion about trans women or trans men or whatever, the trans issue.
Yeah.
It had everything to do with being like, I can't say what I want and I really feel like genocide's being committed against me or whatever the fuck.
Right.
And that's how
such a weak, tired, retreaded argument too. It's so annoying to hear it. It's like,
did I feel like this?
No. She voiced, oh, I'm like a Jew with the Holocaust or whatever. And it's like, no, you're not. You're just not. And we need to like, get rid of that analogy unless you're like starved and gassed. Like that would be the only way in which you could be even reasonably like that.
Right. And the reality is that when you live in a world like this, and this goes to Kelly Marie Tran, that's her name. It just came to me. The one who played Rose Tico or Moses Ingram or whoever else, right? People are going to come at you. And the reality is that if you kind of want to have security and safety and peace of mind and not have to deal with that shit, you just can't be in these ginormous public spaces, essentially, where there is no regulation on the speech, right?
Oh yeah. Well, and then Twitter's gone. I don't think it'll ever be even decent again. But like studies and statistics have shown that there are very few people on Twitter in reality, and of the people that are on there, very few of them actually post very frequently. And so it's something like, the top 10% of the people 10% of the people are doing 90% of the posting.
Yeah.
And so it's just like any other media thing. The loudest voices are being raised up. And then everyone else is just trying to make money off of their, amateur porn site. So
it could be good money. I can see that.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on. So now that we've established that what woke is
Yeah.
and how it gets abused, let's talk and kind of what the original definition is, right? Stay woke,
Right.
keep your eyes open.
Yep.
Let us talk, or let us hear from the creator himself about why it's woke, although he doesn't call it woke.
And I think, I mean, this alongside sort of Rogue One was such a political movie, this political series dressed up obviously in a big kind of sci-fi fantasy. But do you think sometimes through genre movies we can approach the real world in the most raw and direct way? And why do you think that might be?
Well, it's just liberating. You don't have to be pinned down by. We can, it's so because we're doing the thing today. So all these questions. Oh, it's about a contemporary story. It's about refugees, or it's about Ukraine, or it's about this, or it's about. But the beauty of it is that all these things that we're experiencing now are things that are, there's a thousand comps through history. There's always been exiles. There's always been war. There's always been. So if you're doing fantasy or science fiction, or you don't have to go through the catalog of modern current events. You have the whole encyclopedia of all history. I get to cherry pick from every revolution. I'm picking the best things and the worst things about every revolutionary movement that I know about. The best things about the winds of war and what happens to people in we can be with the French Resistance, or we could be with Boudica, or we can be with Toussaint in the Haitian Revolution. You could do anything. I mean, that's the great opportunity. You have the whole catalog to play with.
I just found very funny. I sort of ask sometimes.
And that falls back to what I was saying before about, the roots of science fiction being thrown a little veil over reality, talking about what it is you want to talk about, and no one can directly say, oh, you're talking about this or you're talking about that. You're like, no, I'm talking about Coruscant and the oppression of the people that live in the Undercity. Like, you might think I'm talking about this. That probably has more to do with yourself than with me, because you're choosing to view that in this fantastical world that I've created.
Right. Or even in the mid-levels, right, with the bureaucrats, right?
Right.
And how crushing and oppressive bureaucracy can be for those without, but also those within.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh yeah. Working in bureaucracy like that sucks. Like, when I first started in banking, I didn't fully understand it, because we'd go through the training and everything. It's like, this is never going to apply to me. I don't deal with customers. Like, I'm literally just entering numbers and balancing ledgers. And then I got into the stuff where I was directly interacting with customers, and it's like, this bureaucracy is just keeping up with all the changes is difficult. And then knowing how to properly apply it, because of course everything is written in such couched terms that you cannot be, because they don't want to come out and say, if A, then B. They want there to be leeway. And so you end up in this bureaucratic nightmare where no one can really tell you what to do, and you just have to hope you're doing the right thing. So, like, I understand the suffering of bureaucrats.
Yeah, and it's part of the way. I do want to say, and this is a good opportunity to say it, Star Wars Explained, Generation Tech were the two big ones. There were a couple others that I leaned pretty heavily on. But there's been so much good content and discussion by even people who use the whole like, fuck woke Disney bullshit, but really got into Andor. And there's been substantive conversations about real world shit happening because of this show.
Nice.
Like, when multiple people, like a lot of people, including the guys over at Rebel Force Radio, didn't really understand that the Panopticon, Bentham's Panopticon,
Right.
as a concept, until it came up in discussions about like how it's like, yeah, this is a fucking Panopticon, right? Like, or I watched an interview with set and costume designers, right? They were saying how like they wanted to make the factory feel like a slaughterhouse.
Yeah.
That's why it feels so sterile and everything's like white and all that stuff. And it's just like these kind of like visual elements and story elements in the writing. They kind of help tell this story that's ultimately, it might not have been his purpose,
Mhm.
but I think it's probably a critique of one of the better critiques of late capitalism that I am aware of. Admittedly, having not a lot of interest in consuming a lot of content, right? Like, so I'm sure there's other good shit out there that I haven't seen.
Right.
But I do like Star Wars. And so this is the best that I've seen as a critique of late capitalism.
Yeah.
And it's great because it touches on all of these things that we deal with in human bureaucracy. When Cyril goes to the Bureau of Standards, which is just such an innocuous, like, right? And it does make sense, right? In a gigantic galaxy, you kind of have to have a standard for fuel if you're going to trade it, right? Like for quality, I mean, right? Just like we have weights and measures people at every county in the country that are responsible for ensuring that scales and other things used in commerce are calibrated and accurate, right? So you go get gas, there's always a seal on there from the county Ways and Means office or whatever that says we tested this and what you're getting out, it's accurate.
Yeah,
so
a
what
gallon
it
is a
says
gallon.
there is what you're getting.
Right. Well, that was an issue in the past when there were no standards. It says a gallon, it's really 3/4 of a gallon, and you were just robbed.
Yeah, as I understand, even carrots as a weighting system for like precious gems and precious metals comes from using a balance scale and using carob nuts because they were so uniform. Like the seeds were like uniform size and weight, like, and so then you could just use those, and then it was like 4 carats or whatever, and it balanced out. Okay, that's 4 carats of gold.
Cool.
Yeah, it's my understanding of how they developed measuring systems, right? Like, and so we've been using those systems forever. But even as innocuous it is, you see the cubicle farm, and you're reminded of, various kinds of tech companies and startups and this kind of new corporate culture that's like away from like Fordism and Taylorism, away from like the structured factory, and it's kind of more free form and like in tech. I think they call it the California ideology. I've heard it called.
But then
go ahead.
You can see in the scene where he's assigned there and they pan out and it's huge and everything, that it's meant to like represent that he's lost. He probably had an office before, or at least, something similar, maybe a more close-knit, group with his now 2 dead friends. And now he's in this lifeless area where it's just shared with 100 other people. And that sort of environment is not, conducive to creating lasting, relationships with anybody. Because you just have people cycling in and out all the time.
Absolutely. And so there's a whole bunch of things, elements of this show that we've talked about. I think we talked about, he mentioned, it's an immigrant story. It's like, well, these are kind of universal, right? It's not necessarily about right now, but like, this is how it happens throughout history. And so we could just take this general framework and then write a story about these characters that we want to tell their stories. And it just happens to feel very real because like, that's the kind of process, the historical process. And apparently he's super well read, like guy in history, like as a hobby, he just reads history and stuff.
Right.
That's why he's able to like name drop these things, right? Like the characters in the Haitian Revolution and stuff. But, Cassian, environmental damage caused by industrial extraction. And then there's refugees.
Right.
And in the very first episode, his whole journey throughout the first season is just a consequence of him getting shook down for his fucking papers, right? As a brown guy, right?
Well,
out past curfew or whatever.
Yeah. And that, I guess the second scene, where they confront him and try to shake him down for money and everything. Like in one of the videos we're referencing, he points out, says that he shoots for no reason. And it's like, no, that scene made it so clear that the guy who lived gave him, the reason. The moment that he said, oh, he's dead, it's like, well, now you are too. You have to be. because otherwise I got a witness. And whether I kill one person or I kill two, it's virtually the same in the eyes of the law. Like, I'm going away forever.
Yeah.
So I'd rather kill you, the witness, and possibly get away. And so he had a very good reason for doing it. And I disagreed.
Yeah, no,
with
and
the
there's a
maker.
ton of stuff that I disagree with in the commentary and stuff. One thing that I wanted to point out, and I might have pointed out in the last time we discussed, but it's good to point out again, the aspect of security culture.
Yeah.
Because like that's so central to resistance movements, and most people aren't well, and I'm not going to pretend I'm well read. I've read like a couple books that cover stuff like that.
Read.
What's that?
Said you're read.
I'm well read than a lot of people, but I have read a couple books on resistance movements and organizing, and I've been to direct action trainings, and it's generally a component there. We discuss security culture and how you protect other people in your organizing group by like not really knowing them, and how you compartmentalize it. That's how a fucking terrorist cell is organized.
It's how resistance cells
You
are
can
organized.
get and torture the shit out of this person, but he can't tell you what other. It's the same organization technically,
Yeah.
but they don't have any contact with anybody outside of those they have to have contact with.
You can't blab what you don't know.
Exactly. You can't fucking rat because you don't fucking know who to rat on, right? Or who to rat to.
Well, and that's why, when there's a talk about, Guantanamo Bay and all that stuff and how unsuccessful it was, it's because people eventually just tell you something. So you'll at least stop for a few minutes. Like, maybe later on they figure out it's not true, but at least you're not being tortured at the moment.
Yeah. And I think there also is that like people were settling their petty, the aggrieved business owner, right?
Yeah.
Would say this person that was bad at paying his contracts, right? Or owed him money, and then go to US soldiers and be like, oh, I know this guy who was planning this thing, and they just disappear him, right? And he goes into the sorry, go ahead.
I said it's basically a witch hunt. Like,
yeah, exactly. And there's no
I hear
real
Goody
way.
Meadows. I hear Goody Meadows is a terrorist.
Exactly. Yeah, and so you have all sorts of people detained that aren't actually, have done anything wrong, other than piss someone off that now has a means of, eliminating their annoyance or opponent or whatever. But yeah, you have security culture. You have kind of more explicit, like refugee kind of type story. You have the banality of evil is another concept. Hannah Arendt, I think is her name. I actually have that audiobook in my wish list that I can get with my play points. So I am going to listen to that one soon. I'm right now listening to one called American Midnight about how the U.S. government passed the Sedition Act. And during World War I, basically, they just fucking arrested everybody, imprisoned everybody. Like the infrastructure for a police state were like, oh, look at all this surveillance and this, that, and the other thing. And this is awful, dude. It's been around since the late 19 teens. We have over 100 years of development of the fucking infrastructure for the U.S. to be a fascist police state.
It's become so common that now people voluntarily give
with their
information
ring cameras.
With their ring cameras. Yeah,
absolutely, 100%.
Don't get a fucking ring camera, people.
Did I tell you when we got burglarized a couple Christmases ago that the cops told me that?
Yeah.
Like, you should get a ring camera because then we could try and figure it out. And I was like, I don't want to have I know the city just got a grant from the state because that's how it always works, right? The state and the federal government was like, oh, here's money, and then the local cities are like, if we get this money for buying this thing for the cops, then we'll get this thing for the cops. No one ever questions it, right?
Yeah.
Especially if they can do it on grant money, JAG, Justice Assistance Grants, or other means of financing it, right? But yeah, they've hired a city of Chico, 100,000 people barely in the city, and they just hired like 2 data analysts or 1 data analyst and like a part-time person, but they had to hire someone to manage all the data because now they have fucking security cameras places and they're implementing all this like surveillance software and stuff, like facial recognition and all that shit, so they can basically keep tabs on people.
Yeah. It's a lot easier
Yeah.
than, satisfying people's needs and making it so you don't need to keep track of them.
Right, exactly. And
Yes.
those ring cameras are part of that. So when the
Oh,
cop
yeah.
was like, "Oh, you should just get a ring camera, and that way we can access it and do this and this,"
No ring, no nest, no nothing.
No.
Don't.
You want to know when I come and go from my fucking house? Suck
Yeah.
my fucking dick.
That's the thing. And the police put in requests, and the requests are granted.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what? They can already do that with cell phones.
Yeah.
If I have my cell phone with me, you can know where I am, at least like to a certain degree, right? They can't pinpoint the exact place you're standing, but
Right.
they can say you're near there, right? I don't know how accurate triangulation off a cell tower is.
It's usually within like 10 meters.
Yeah, I was going to say it's probably less than 50 feet.
Yeah.
But yeah, you have all of this surveillance state stuff, the quip of Luthen telling Cassian, well, first rule is you always have an exit, right? Always have a strategy to get out. So do concrete planning, think of all of the various things that could go wrong and have some kind of contingency, operational planning, big part of resistance and insurrectionist movements. Also, don't use, we were talking about ring cameras and nests and all that shit. Don't use any technology you don't control, right?
Yeah, which is most technology these days. Like, you don't control your phone, you don't control your ring camera. In fact, in almost every instance where you can now have software, you are leased that software or given rights to it. Those rights can be revoked at any moment, for all the people that think that they
software as
own
a service rather than as a product.
Yeah. For all the people that think they own an ebook, unless you have downloaded it as a PDF, you do not own it.
Right.
And even then, they could probably say you took it illegally.
Right, exactly. And then there's another scene in before the Aldani heist in that arc, the second arc, where Nemec is telling Cassian, he's like, about the manifesto and the old star path.
Yeah.
And it's like, this is out of date. And I thought that was like one of the fucking most brilliant things in the whole season, was that kind of juxtaposition of this is old technology, but because it's old, it's resilient.
Yeah.
And it works and it does what it needs. And if it breaks, we can fix it. Right. And how like the more complex the technology needed to be deployed, the more vulnerable it is, or the more vulnerable you make yourself by using it.
Ooh, now our end card has to include our coverage of John Deere.
Oh yeah, we did talk about John Deere. Yeah, and complexity.
Yeah,
and now
they can basically turn off your tractor.
Now even the tractor, you spend $250,000 on a fucking combine or whatever, and you still don't technically own it.
Yep.
Because the thing that makes it go is owned by somebody else. It's fucking wild, dude.
The software, yep.
That's fucking wild.
Software locked butt warmers.
Yeah, and as someone who like, and kind of like part of the reason we come into this, I think earlier we were introducing ourselves as people who have sometimes disagree on things. And most of our friendship over the last 15, 20 years.
2005.
Yeah. Has been built around kind of like you came in with a lot more like techno utopian ideas because you were way more immersed in sci-fi.
Mm-hmm.
You have bookshelves of Arthur C. Clarke and all that stuff. And then I came more from like, I have a degree in history and studies in that area. And it's always been an interest of mine, and then fell down the peak oil rabbit hole. So I come from like, technology is not going to save us, although it's here now, we can use it for some things.
Yeah.
It's not like technology will infinitely increase in its utility to human beings. At some point, it had law of diminishing returns, right?
Right.
But I found that discussion about that technology really fascinating because it tied into that kind of idea about complexity being a vulnerability.
Yeah.
And then later we get in the last episode, even perhaps, we get Nemec's manifesto, and he talks about how like, God, we could do a whole fucking episode on that. So maybe we should.
Just on the manifesto. Yeah.
Just on the manifesto. Yeah. Let's do that instead. But
okay.
Suffice to say, that right there, like the reason that it resonated with people, some people complain and they're like, I want escapism. right? I don't want reality shoved in my face when I'm trying to get away from reality by watching a show on
don't.
DisneyPlus. Fair critique, okay?
Their critique. Go watch fucking Obi-Wan or something. Don't watch this one.
Right, exactly. But it's somehow Obi-Wan was woke. I don't know. I think because
What
they
did
had
I
a
miss?
black main villain or something.
Oh, good God.
But really, they botched the Inquisitors. The Inquisitors are so scary in Rebels, dude. Oh my
yeah.
God. Every time they faced him, it was like, oh shit, Inquisitors. And now it's just like, and also it's like, oh, everybody can get stabbed and live. Like
Yeah.
Fennec Shand and Boba Fett and
It kind of takes away the dangerousness of lightsabers. You can do impaled
right.
out on the
And
other side.
also it takes away from the severe transformation that Anakin underwent when he got the suit.
True.
Like, dude, he was barely alive and in pain the whole time because like keeping someone that damaged alive was never you were never going to near what you used to be.
Yeah.
They also still don't explain how getting shot in the stomach requires like gears and stuff.
And
Like when they opened up Fennec Shand and she had like fucking gears and stuff.
Star Wars. It's always been like a cyberpunk Western motif, where it's high tech and low tech at the same time. I'm surprised she wasn't steam powered.
That would be sick if she was steam powered. It's just like little puffs of steam coming out of her.
I gotta put water in her every once in a while to keep her going. Oh,
Ming-Na Wen is fucking. Dude, do you realize she's like 55? Did we discuss this?
No, I know she was older, but I mean,
she's fucking very good, very attractive for someone as old as she is.
Yeah.
Whatever. It is what it is. Anyway, so you have this critique of technology and you get into the manifesto and he talks about how power is brittle and it's very real and it feels real because it's so fucking like you're like listening to it and you're like, holy shit, isn't he fucking talking? This is exactly what we see outside.
Yeah.
Right. Or on our other media platforms. Right.
Exactly. Yeah. And
so let's get into these last couple clips and wrap this up because I was supposed to go outside and continue digging post holes for a fence I'm building and
just get a floodlight.
I might do that.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Tony Gilroy is probably most famous for writing all 4 of the Bourne films, and the legal thriller Michael Clayton is great at writing government conspiracies. And in his hands, the Empire isn't evil because of the dark side of the Force, but more so because of the human negligence and bureaucracy. Because mid-level bureaucrats would rather maintain their positions of power rather than shake up the boat and get the attention of the higher-ups. In this case,
100%.
Yeah, no, and it's just kind of that fit in with other discussions of like the banality of evil and just how like everybody has a thing they're trying to do.
Yeah.
Right. Even when I forget his name now, the ginger guy. It's always got to be a ginger that's the fucking traitor or whatever.
Oh yeah. I don't
but anyway, when he goes to meet Luthen, he's like, I want out because I fucking had a kid, and like now I have to think about someone other than myself, right?
Yeah.
But like ultimately, why was he in the ISB to begin with? It wasn't to be a spy, right? Like he got recruited when he realized shit was fucked up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you do those things. Cyril wanted the kind of sexy police job. That's why even though when his boss is like straight up like, nah, bro, but don't even pursue this.
Cover it up.
Because they weren't good people.
Yeah. Like,
he didn't even say cover it up.
No, he did. He didn't directly say the words, but he basically said like, oh, they weren't, coming out of a brothel because that's illegal, and they, certainly weren't, drinking this drink. Odds is illegal. No. They died trying to help someone. Nothing too heroic because we don't want a parade. Like that's the sort of shit you deal with. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess in that sense, it was covering up. I remember that where he's like, something that makes them make them sound like they were good people, basically. Right. But ultimately, yeah, don't go into this because it's just not worth the fucking effort.
Well, yeah, then you got to write up an expense report, for why you're buying, ham for their wives and all that stuff. It's just more paperwork. And I do agree, that like basically bureaucracy exists to propagate itself as it is. And I can say that when you exist within a bureaucracy, trying to affect any sort of change is an uphill battle, even if ultimately that change that you're trying to affect is a positive one that will like save the company or the agency time or money. It still gets opposition strongly, because that means that someone has to now go talk to someone, explain the plan, and get approval. And you as the person, typically you as the person who is suggesting the improvement, you'll ultimately get no credit anyway. They're not going to give you more money. They're not going to give you a pay raise or anything like that. Just because you saved other company $100,000 a year on mail delivery charges, Dad. So the reason for doing it is just completely stripped away, and so you just carry on as you always have. I mean, I'd like to think I'm one of the few rare people that actually still pushes for it.
Yeah, and I think, but I mean, this when we say bureaucracy, we don't necessarily just mean the government. You're talking about corporate bureaucracies, and also like nonprofits are
Oh, yeah.
bureaucratic by nature, and you get that a lot where you get like to kind of like larger nonprofits where they like just kind of go through the motions, make sure someone's getting a check. Right, like the executive director is this nice person who was a good fundraiser for the Republicans, so we'll put her in charge of the unhoused situation so that we have a person on the inside, right?
Yeah.
And then they fucking stack the board. They get rid of anybody that challenges. It's happened at environmental nonprofits locally as well, where like the people who drop the biggest checks are like, hey, get the fucking radicals off the board and out of our way, because we have a job to do here, and that job is to pretend like we do something without actually doing anything that might hurt the business community, right?
Right, and that's the thing a lot of people don't realize about nonprofits, or maybe they just don't think about it because they hear nonprofit, they think good. Is it doesn't necessarily mean that no one's getting paid. And those people that are getting paid don't want to lose their jobs, and the people in charge make vast sums of money. So,
I mean, most nonprofits don't. I know that the unhoused, the larger unhoused nonprofit locally, the director got paid fucking like 6 figures.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, how can you take that and then every fucking Christmas season send me an envelope begging for cash in your big, and guess what? I started fucking packing it full of stuff because it was a return envelope where they had an account that got charged for postage. So I fucking made that shit as heavy as possible. And I just wrote on the fucking envelope, like, actually fucking stop paying your executive director 6 figures and use that money for actually serving the fucking homeless community. Yeah. And then I'll consider giving you money. I'm not going to pay for this bitch's salary. Fuck that bitch.
And like all too often, that's what it is vast amounts of money.
Like justify fucking this, like basically played cover for the city's fucking inhumane policy towards unhoused folks.
Well, and it's super annoying that it has nothing to do with nonprofits, but it's super annoying that the people in charge always seem to want a bonus for what everyone else would consider doing your job. Like, I don't get a massive bonus because I did my job. Why should you get a massive bonus? Like, your job is to, if you're a CEO of a company, your job is to make the company more money. You did that. Congratulations. You don't deserve a fucking bonus. Like, you already get money for that. Why?
Well, generally in their contracts, that's part of their contract.
Well, yeah, but I mean, like, why is it in there? Like, it doesn't need to be in there. It's to attract qualified and competent, people. Man, I can tell you there's plenty of people who would take that job for half the fucking money.
Yeah, or you can have like absolutely no experience in the energy industry and find yourself on the board of a Ukrainian oil company because your dad's the vice president.
I don't know what we're talking about.
Who knows? I guess you have to have a dad that's a vice president or president.
Is this in Andor?
No, I mean, but like that level of corruption is there. It's one thing that I didn't see a lot of people talk about, and maybe I'll bring this up real quick before we go to the next clip. In the end, when like Deidre's character had like basically said, take him alive. We want this. This is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to uncover the network and find access, find the guy remember security culture. They can't all talk to each other, but there is a connection. We need to find that connection because then we pull that fucking thread and the whole shit unravels.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And she could see that clearly because she's intelligent.
Yeah.
And the others were just like, I think, what was the line?
Well, she's trying to improve it too.
Needed something to wash the taste of Aldani out of the Emperor's mouth.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning they're like, we just want to make the boss happy. The
Mm-hmm.
actual mission objective is irrelevant because if the boss is happy, then we keep our jobs.
Yeah, we keep getting paid, and no one goes.
It's
to
irrelevant
prison.
if we're doing our job to our best ability or not.
Right.
We
Well,
just
yeah,
need to
and
keep the job. Go ahead.
I understood her. I understood like her because it's irksome when you know that you can improve things and you get so much opposition.
Yeah, and but it also like shows. I mean, not just her intelligence, but like this is also true in real life situations, right? You have they just wanted like they get this thing, they get it set up, they're going to go bust Anton Krieger's group and all that stuff, blah blah blah. And Luthen knew when he went to talk to Saw about it, and Saw's like, "Okay, finally, you convinced me. I'm in. You know, I'm in. I'm going to help Krieger in this mission." And he's like, "No, my guy on the inside said they already know about it, and it's going to be a fucking bloodbath." And then they had this kind of conversation, and there's kind of moral conflict, like, do we risk our guy on the inside by showing our hand that we knew that the Empire knew, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Or do we let it happen and allow them to have a victory that may like take their eyes off of us? Like things are getting hot. They found one part of it. Do we try and protect that little piece, or basically like in Walking Dead, hack the fucking bit limb off?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's essentially right. Hack the bit limb off and let them have that satisfaction that they had this victory. And then maybe that will cause them, okay, no, we already got that guy. Right.
Right.
And miss everything else that's happening. And they knew that's what was going to happen. And in that scene when Deidre's on Ferrix in the final episode, and then she's on the line where they're making jokes, they're like, "Oh, she's not fucking happy." Because they killed him instead of fucking taking him hostage to interrogate him. Anton Krieger, which is a character you don't even get anything but like a hollow of, right?
Yeah.
And apparently, I think it was like a costume designer, or it was somebody who worked on the movie. They just needed like a character. So now somebody like the way that Star Wars fans are, right? There's going to be like this elaborate backstory to this character that was just like, we need somebody quick, take a picture, make it into a hollow or whatever.
Tell me about Ponda Baba.
Tell me about Ponda Baba. Yeah, exactly. Right. Just like long stories about obscure characters that were really just kind of background.
Max Rebo is a spy, it turns out.
He was, right? And Snice
was
killed fucking Zero.
Yep.
Oh, spoilers for the Clone Wars. And anyway, you know, and then it all came true exactly like Luthen thought it would.
Yeah.
Right. And then that really is kind of like helps propel Saw down a paranoid path. And that's another interesting character. And obviously he was in Clone Wars, had a couple episodes in Rebels, and then was in Rogue One. So most even casual fans are familiar with Saw as a character.
Mm-hmm.
But like that kind of discussion of the factionalism, also very true, right? And then his descent into paranoia, where he's like, everybody's watching me. Dude, I cannot tell you how many fucking circles I've been in. And it is an explicit government tactic. The CIA and the FBI did that from, I'm finding now with this book, American Midnight, has been going on since before the FBI was a thing. That government agents, usually using private detective agencies, a lot of corporations did as well. They'd infiltrate fucking organizations, and then provide intelligence. And so these people think, I remember a story I heard of a woman in a environmental activist group in the UK, fucking fell in love with this guy, got fucking married to him. I think they never had children together. But then when his time as an intelligence officer came to an end and his superior said, you have to pull back. We got what we wanted out of you. She's like, I was fucking planning on getting married to this man and having a family with him and this and the other thing. Turns out he already had a fucking family and kids, and he was an intelligence officer. And so that's how fucking deep it can go.
Yeah.
It's like, dude, I dated this guy, like, you know, I licked his asshole or whatever it was, right? Like, just you have an intimate relationship with someone, and then you're like, oh shit, like, turns out
that was entirely fake, and he's a really good actor.
Yeah, and he's just a fucking cop, and that shit's been happening forever. So like that scene with Saw being all paranoid, like, are you in on it? And it's Luthen hilarious. It's like, it's 2 tubes, just because it's just absurd, right?
Yeah.
And then 2 tubes is like, what the fuck, man?
Wouldn't mean what the hell? Yeah,
that scene was so funny. Knowing it's just like, what the fuck, dude? Don't throw me under the bus. That's not true. But Luthen was making the point. It's like, you're so fucking paranoid. Like, get over it. Like, you don't know. You'll never know, right?
Yeah.
And also it damages it. And I've seen movements, even small groups, get torn apart over nothing because like of distrust, or even if it's not actual infiltrators, they're so paranoid of infiltrators that they don't learn to trust anybody. And so all of that shit is just like, when I say Andor is the most woke, it's not just because like it's a genuine critique of oppression and systems of oppression, and how everybody just kind of goes along to get along, and that there's not real clear good and evil, right? You can say the Empire is evil, but like the joke from we should have had that queued up. The joke from Clerks, I think it was, where Randall's talking to Dante.
Oh yeah, about just doing the job.
Destruction of the second Death Star, and all the contractors.
There were contractors on
that. Hundreds of thousands of contractors got killed. Like, so are the rebels really good guys, or are they terrorists? Right?
He's just a guy trying to get back home to his wife. Next thing you know, he's in peace. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, but it's true, right? It's all morally ambiguous, and so when I say Andor is woke, it's not because it has a brown star. Although I think Diego Luna does a great job, and like most of the people are not most of them, but like, you know, the working class, that class consciousness element is fucking spot on. Like the culture of work, and we're gonna get into a little bit more of that, I think.
We are, and actually, I would much appreciate if we could go to a clip real quick.
Yeah, let's play a clip.
Yeah.
And remember, it's a very short clip.
Yes.
Use the bathroom.
Yeah, I'll try to be quick.
Be super quick, because we don't want more than 10 seconds playing, or fucking it's going to get flagged by the algorithm.
Yep.
Go.
Not be a true believer. Yet it's realistic. People need to eat. Everyone can't be a real freedom fighter.
I saw the first minute you came into camp. You're just like me. We're born in a hole, and all we know is climbing over somebody else to get out.
In that way, the show is very concerned with the working class. Gilroy is showing us the inequality of the Star Wars universe. The Empire isn't just evil, but uneven. Some are highly privileged while the masses are powerless. The galaxy's denizens are supposed to cower in fear and follow directions, and those that work for the Empire can get away with murder. The common man is also easily swept up by the system into labor camps. In the show, they're called prisons, and seemingly used for felons. But obviously, anyone can end up there guilty or not. The workers are only as useful as their productivity, so working them to the death is always a net gain, since they can always be replaced when they drop out. But then we also get the flip side of that. The show isn't just saying working class good, rich people bad. Because coming back to practical concerns, we see that the revolution must be funded, and so we have this wealthy person in the character of Mon Mothma, who believes in the cause and uses her privilege to help the foot soldiers. At this point, I should say, the show obviously deals in politics, but I think anyone of any political persuasion can see themselves in some of this. I think part of the beauty of this show is that thematically, the writing staff has weaved in a real sense of historical accuracy, without sticking too close to any specific historical event.
Yeah, it went a little beyond the point there was talking.
Okay, yeah.
But it's fine. I thought it was an actual clip from Disney. And I think that the obnoxious music is to prevent getting flagged for copyright.
Yeah.
Which is totally fine, man. And this guy's like us. He's got more subscribers.
I think
than us,
he's got like 177.
but not much. Yeah, and it's a really
Yeah.
fantastic video. So check him out. I think Magic Carpet Company he calls himself. Yeah,
Yep,
Magical Carpet
the
Company.
Magic Carpet Company,
Yeah,
175 subscribers. Give him some more.
Give him some more. He did a fantastic job, and honestly, like we took a while to put this together because like we're so fucking amateur, like we're still figuring all this shit out. But he says a lot of the things that I wanted to say. But that the clear class analysis part is like really strong. And the workers ultimately, like, there's a whole culture and so much world building around like industrial workers, and there is a clear class division. I've always wanted to just write a monologue about in defense of Perrin, right? Because everybody thinks Mon Mothma's husband is this piece of shit, and I honestly think this show showed Mon Mothma's the piece of shit. But
Yeah,
she's a piece of shit as a mother and as a partner because she's driven by things outside her family, which I actually empathize with a lot because I always get critique. It's like, why don't you, spend more time at home with your kids and this, that? Why don't you just like be present more? And I'm like, why are you always trying to do things? Why are you always at meetings? Why are you going to protests and organizing protests and going to speak to the city about issues instead of just like hanging out with your kids? And it's like, well, there's fucking, we got to get shit done, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, you want to enjoy your time with your kids, but you also want to give them a future.
Yeah, and for me, it's more like I don't think that will ever give them the future that they deserve, right? They're my babies, so like they deserve the world, and they're going to inherit a fucking dystopian hellscape. The best I can do, because I know I can't beat that system, is at least demonstrate, or I guess get some receipts to show the kids and say, I fucking tried, right? But I thought, I think that's a really interesting element too of the class division. I do think that Mon Mothma's out of touch. She cares about the Gormans, but like we don't know what her connection is, right? She cares about it as like an idea, right? And that kind of also is Marxist, for lack of a better term, right? It's the bourgeoisie is in this realm of kind of good feelings, right? Like I want to know that those people like are safe because it makes me
I want them to have a pizza party so that they're happy for a day, but not realizing that you wouldn't have to have pizza parties if they could afford their own fucking pizza.
Right, exactly. Like if you're an employer, sure, right?
Yeah.
You're using that incentive of a pizza party.
I have dealt with a lot.
Yeah, but then you have like the workers whose needs are very material, right? Like
simple needs.
They're just it's two different worlds. In the monologue, the Marva monologue via Hollow at her funeral, she talks about like the dignity of our work. We had our work, and I think that there's a lot of validity to how pride in work and how the kind of solidarity of work. I mean, my ex-wife's father was UAW, did a bunch of the strikes in the early 70s when unions were still a thing, and worked for GM like starting in like the late 50s, early 60s, and most until he retired after 35 or 40 years or whatever it was, right? Started working there as a young man right out of high school. And made a whole career out of it, and he was a union man and this, that, and the other thing. And like there's a lot of solidarity like in their community, even in I forget the name of the town, but it's in the I want to say Sun Valley. It's one of the cities in the massive suburban sprawl of Southern California. But like their neighbors and stuff, like they had these jobs where they can kind of all identify, right? Him and his buddies after work would like go get a 6-pack of beer and then go, sit out by the port or whatever and watch the sunset while they smoked a joint and drank beer. And they had like a friendship that was built around like their work unit.
Yeah.
And you see, and that deindustrialization fucking stripped us of that. And I honestly think that's one of the contributors, a lot of things, technological change, like social media and stuff, is a big factor too. But I think deindustrialization and all these like lost generations of people are not only angry because they've lost their economic security, right? But they also lost that kind of solidarity that helped them, I guess, have a broader world perspective, if that makes sense, and help them empathize with other people because they had to work with other people and could see that they could disagree on some issues, but then they had common cause in other issues. And then, as you know, unions were broken and we deindustrialized, like there's not that kind of level of solidarity anymore. And then at the same time, you're getting bombarded with like a curated social media feed that tells you what you want to hear. And then you see this division among, you know, individuals across the country just intensify.
Well, and it's really hard to get that back just because getting good pay requires job hopping these days, and so it's very difficult to forge any long-term solidarity or even just friendliness with the people that you work with. When you're like, oh, they got here and they're already talking about how they want to move over to another department that pays more and all that. And so it's like, even if you wanted to have that solidarity or friendship or anything like that, it's hard to first engage with people and then want to keep it going, just due to the fact that everyone's, whether they work at a gig job or not, we're all pretty transient when it comes to our employment.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. So there's a lot of that, and then we have a clip here that discusses the daughters of Ferrix.
We do.
No, it doesn't really discuss them; it just refers to them.
Yeah.
But I like the clip.
Oh, that is bad. What? Maybe we don't. Kick me out when I hit play. No, I can't. I just got to get to the right time. Let me get it.
So you were clipped, and when you hit play, it went back to here.
Yeah, that might not be good. Okay.
Okay, so this scene we brought in because it fits within this kind of class analysis section, and it shows the depth of Tony Gilroy's understanding of history. Because in the writing, him and the other writers, right? Like it wasn't just one dude. But like they would include something like this in it. Go ahead and play the clip.
Yeah.
I should be coming by more often.
Is that your mother?
Or yours. She can't stay here much longer.
Good luck with that.
What about the daughters of Ferrix? She's a past president.
Yep.
They must have a warm room somewhere.
They've tried.
They must have a warm room somewhere.
Right.
So you didn't even quite understand, I think, right?
No, I didn't get that. Yeah, I didn't understand why it was there. What are you doing?
And I was talking about mutual aid and like that function. Most people are unaware. And again, I'm a collapsnik, right? So I'm constantly thinking of how humans exist before highly complex bureaucracies that only exist because, rapid depletion of finite fossil fuels, and all this. But it came to my attention through this study that like a lot of industrial organizations, in fact, I loaned you that, you never probably read it, Mining California.
I began reading it. Yeah.
Did you ever finish it?
I mean, through the first couple of chapters. No, I didn't.
And then you gave it back to me, right?
I did. Yeah.
I think I have it on my shelf, or I loaned it to someone else and never got it back. I don't know.
No, I don't see it on my shelf right
It's
now.
not important, bro.
No, it's not.
Anyway, book Mining California, they're talking about like in the chapter on the lumber industry, they're talking about injuries, and it's really fucking common in the late 1800s, early 1900s to like lose a hand or a foot or something in your workplace, right? And so what they had, because there wasn't Medicare and there wasn't Social Security and there wasn't like robust like government assistance, and I mean, not that it's particularly robust, right?
Not for us.
We come to expect it. And then when it doesn't get delivered, it makes us mad. Like the pandemic response was fucking horrendous. And there was a much better way to do that that's beyond the scope of this conversation. But in the before times, there were these solidarity networks of, and it might be like, you know, in a steel town like Pittsburgh or something. You might have someone whose husband gets killed on the job, and there's an organization of the workers together that, and often the women, right, of the women weren't in the steel industry in any number, especially back then. They still aren't now. But it would be like organized by the women or widows or whatever. And then if someone couldn't afford coal, like a widow or her husband died on the job or whatever, there was no support network for her, but she was at home with a few kids. Then they would organize to pay for her coal so she could keep her furnace running through the winter to stay warm and not die. And similarly, you had organizations like the Moose Lodge and the Odd Fellows and, you know, Rebecca's and all these other organizations that you might, if you live in an older town, see like, what the fuck, Odd Fellows Lodge? Obviously, the building is no longer used for that because those organizations still exist, but like they're dead and dying. And really, it's a good place if millennials want to step up as the boomers and greatest generation folks continue to die off. Like there are positions in these long-standing organizations. But anyway, they had these organizations that supported people. And that I just think it's like one of those details. It's like, I mean, it's so like you hear about the Daughters of Ferrex, and she mentions it again in her speech in the last episode. You see the doctor or the black woman that escapes, I forget her name, that escapes with them in the last episode, coming by the house with the doctor, right?
Right, to take care of her, yeah.
But you don't really get any more other than this organization exists, right? And that she was a past president and that they're kind of caring for her in a roundabout way by like just checking in on her, et cetera, so forth. That's mutual aid.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, ultimately, that's what you do when government is irrelevant. Like, other than the corporate authority that had jurisdiction, did you ever get a vibe in the show that there was some kind of like local government that they had to contend with?
No, they definitely made it seem as though the corporate sector was the only authority in the area.
Right. And remember when they came to find Andor, most everybody was like giving them side eye and shit, being like, damn, we haven't seen them in a while.
Yeah.
I mean, like they govern themselves.
Yeah.
And
as people often do when left unmolested.
Yeah. And how do they govern themselves? How do they provide for the security of their persons in old age? They have these mutual aid networks, in this case, the Daughters of Ferrex, right?
Yeah.
And if a man lost his leg at work or whatever, they'd probably provide medical care, or it would be a network to where you could be like, oh, you know what? My cousin owns a shop that does this thing and you can work there. And they rehome them in terms of like how they can contribute to the social whole. Right.
Yeah. Basically, you
And
know, when you can't do one thing.
Yeah. It's just a little detail that's like, in my opinion, it's fucking awareness of systems of oppression and awareness of like strategies for dealing with the breakdown of society. That sounds woke to me.
Yeah, motherfucker did something.
All right, this last one is going to be kind of hard. It really makes me uncomfortable, but I wanted to draw particular attention. I don't think anybody that's seen the show would be like, there was not, like, would ever deny there was an explicit critique of the prison industrial complex. It's like a significant portion of the show, and really most people who are skeptical about it because of its pacing, et cetera, so forth, changed their mind with the Narkina 5 arc.
Yeah. It was
mostly because they like Anthony Serkis. I had no idea he played the fucking chimp from like the new Planet of the Apes. Talk about member berries, right?
He does most of it. I think he was Gollum or something like that. I don't know.
He was Gollum. He was fucking Caesar in the Planet of the Apes, and he played Snoke in The Last Jedi. Because I think he was just a hologram in Force Awakens.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, he played the character in the hologram, obviously.
And then he actually played himself in some of the Marvel movies recently. I mean, not Andy Serkis, but he was acting non-motion capture.
Yeah, and
I think it was Age of Ultron.
In the show, and he's a fucking great actor.
Yeah.
it's really kind of remarkable that he just kind of became that guy that does the motion capture acting. But he's a phenomenal actor.
Yeah.
And most
Yeah.
everybody that changed their tune about this show did because his character was so compelling. Now, they got some things wrong. I think we discussed this offline. Like, one of the things I heard was like, oh, you know, that arc is really about Andy Serkis's character's arc from being like, no, I don't want to, and like maturing into someone who wants to rebel. And I was like, that whole never more than 12 to me was just like, and everybody loved that line. That's when he knew he was going to fight back. The very fact he knew never more than 12.
Yeah, that he counted.
Already tells you that he was fucking thinking about it.
Yeah.
He was trying not to. And how much of that exists in the world we're in now, right? Like in social movements, etc., where it's like, you kind of know you want to resist, right?
Yeah.
But like, and you've thought about it, but you're just not there yet. The consequences still outweigh your desire for change. Your fear of consequences outweighs your desire for change. And I think, someone I think referred to it as accelerationism, and I want to do a whole different video on accelerationism because I had to learn about it because I had never heard of it before. But when I'm like, things have to get worse before fucking people will actually start to resist, because the consequences of resisting are severe.
Interesting. Yeah. Oh, that's been something I've thought about for a while. It really first crossed my mind when they started putting in self-checkout, and everyone was like, oh, they're gonna, they're making me do their work, but then it's also going to put people out of a business or out of a job. So I'm going to keep going to the normal checkout. And I'm like, no, I'm going to use that self-checkout because people have to get desperate before, like serious change can happen. So like, if I can accelerate everyone losing their job by using self-checkout, I'm going to do it because I want things to get to that worst point so we can just get past it. Like, there's no sense in dragging out this late stage capitalism that we're in if you can actively do things to increase it. And so, you have to take away the bread and circuses and all that stuff. You have to make it so that people get to that point where they're willing to step up and do something.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And I mean, ultimately,
use self-checkout.
On self-checkout. I was thinking the same when someone's like, "Oh, you're like, so the strategy then is to like make things worse so that people rebel." And it's like, no. Things are gonna get bad all on their own. They're already fucking bad. But when I say things have to get worse, I mean like those rail workers that like were like, what the fuck? And then like all the people who were supposed to be pro-worker and got elected saying they were pro-worker wound up just being fucking scabs, enforcing the tentative agreement on the rail workers by legislative fiat, right? And I'm like, if things were, what I mean by things are going to have to get worse for people to rebel, how desperate are those people? They're like, well, we tried, we agitated, and we'll continue to organize, but they're not at the point where they're like, fuck it, I'm going on strike today.
Right.
They're still going to think about it, why they continue to go to work and get fucking fucked over and have no time off and not get to see their families and like work under horrendous conditions, etc., so forth. I think a lot of it was just sick time. They literally wanted
that's
7
all they wanted.
Fucking sick days.
Yeah.
No, I think they wanted more than that, but 7 was like the compromise that was floated in negotiations. And so, but because of the strategic importance, the centrality of rail transport to a functioning economy, the government can just force a contract on them. And then what happens, like we have we've seen in U.S. history, when they go on strike illegally, or what's deemed as illegally, right?
It's just staying in bed. It's just staying in bed striking. Could you just not show up to work, not get out of bed? I mean, it seems to me like that's just that's just as ineffective. Don't even say you're sick. Just don't show up for work. I mean, if you're not in what is the punishment for violation of that contract? I guess
you get fucking fired.
Okay. I mean, that's what's going to happen anyway.
Is it people are in a position where they need to keep working and like the conditions there? And I don't know anybody specifically in the rail industry. And so I just want to, with caution, say my general observation, I am not in any of their shoes and don't know their financial situations, don't know if they got kids to support or a ex-wife to send alimony to.
We can assume.
We
we
can
can assume. I was chuckling. I said, like we can assume that one or more of these things are true for a lot of people.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm not going to begrudge anybody because I'm not there.
Yeah.
But like when I say things have to get worse, I mean like you see this kind of like repressive where like, and you saw it in Rebels a lot, where it's just the presence of the Empire, like made them want to rebel. Oh, we're being occupied or whatever.
Yeah.
You saw in Rebels, it's like, oh, they refer to it in the Aldani arc, right? Oh, they're moving them to enterprise zones, like they're putting them to work, and we can assume that those are kind of typical like employer-employee wage relationships, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not slave labor. But ultimately, like that's not enough, and in our own reality, in our context here in the United States, like people aren't fed up enough to just be like, I don't give a shit if you told me I have to take this contract.
Right.
I have agency over my body, right? And I'm not going to fucking work for you. I'm going to actively attempt to cut into the company's profits by fucking blocking, tracks or work stoppages or sick outs or whatever
strategy. Sabotage if necessary.
We don't advocate for sabotage.
We do not, but it's a thing that happens.
It has happened in the past.
Yeah.
And we don't necessarily endorse that, nor do we necessarily criticize it.
Mm-hmm. It has its place.
All right, let's watch this clip on the prison industrial complex.
Hopefully this one works. Let's see. I'm gonna hit play.
Can't just not turn up.
He'll be here.
Override engaged. 5-2, you have the floor.
Got other deliveries waiting.
Eyes front.
Let's just get him out on the ring.
Right, step forward. Let's go. Move. Step forward and stop. Now, move. Stop. Eyes front, I said.
Sorry, I had to wait. They're short-handed.
That's good. It's irrelevant if they're short-handed down there.
Yeah. Just to show everybody's suffering.
And I had talked to you, I think, about this a long time ago before we started doing the, I guess you could say, pre-production, where we put the show together, right? And that's because, like, I saw that, and I didn't hear anybody else talk about it. But
that hit me hard.
What's that?
Because I've seen that hit me hard because I've witnessed it firsthand. Not as I being the one, but me being in the vehicle with the person getting pulled over and getting this treatment.
Oh, tell me the story.
It was Bryce.
I don't doubt that.
Oh,
because he was your roommate, and also like
we were coming back from Buffalo Wild Wings, and we got pulled over by, I think it was 2 different cop cars, and there was 3 police officers total, and they got him out, and basically had him spread his legs and do all this stuff, and at one point, like one of them kicked the back of his knee to try to get him to buckle. Obviously the result being like, oh, look at him, he's stumbling, he's drunk. And they just did everything they could, and it eventually got to the point I just kind of like poked my head out. I'm like, are we gonna go home soon? And they're like, oh shit, there's somebody else in there, he's white, better let him go. Like, it's just terrible shit. They were just trying to look for something, forcibly trying to set him up for failure, doing this sort of thing, where it's like, start, stop, like spread your legs, don't spread your legs, like contradictory orders, with the idea being that eventually you'll fail at one of them.
Right. And it really struck me because I remember this is super common too, right? Like where you're like, young black men, kids get shot. And it's for not following commands or reaching when they were told to keep their hands, and so the cop is justified because the cop is scared for his fucking life. But then I recalled this story. It was actually a white guy in this particular case, but I just remember the body cam footage and being really bothered by it. And this scene, no one talked about it, but that little, how long did that fucking take?
It was all like 5 seconds. Yeah.
5 seconds, if that.
Start, stop, come forward, stop.
Move, eyes front. No, I said eyes front. Boom, boom, boom. And he's like yelling at him.
Yeah.
Well, basically, he's at their mercy.
Yeah.
And telling him to do things. Like he said, move forward, stop, move, stop. Like,
yeah, it was like 5 different commands in a very short period.
yeah, and it reminded me of this clip, which we're gonna watch just a tiny little bit because it's just so fucking disturbing.
Basically, as much as we can stomach.
Yeah.
Down, straight out in front of you. Push yourself up to a kneeling position. I said, keep your legs crossed! I'm sorry. I didn't say there's a conversation. Put your hair! Hands up in the air! You do that again, we're shooting you. Do you understand? Please do not shoot me. Then listen to my instructions. I'm trying to do what you don't talk! Listen! Hands straight up in the air. Do not put your hands down for any reason. You think you're going to fall, you better fall on your face. Your hands go back in the small of your back or down. We are going to shoot you. Do you understand me? Yes, sir. Crawl towards me. Crawl towards me! Yes, sir. Don't talk!
Yeah. That's enough.
Was he supposed
And
to
I
keep his
think
hands
what
in the air
was
and
is that he
crawl?
was in basketball shorts.
Yeah.
And
Well, and the
just,
thing
like,
is,
instinctively, because that's when they start to sag, you just you don't even think about it. You're just like, oh, pull my fucking shorts up, right?
yeah. Well,
he
and then
got
there were
shot
so many
5 feet behind.
contradictory orders. So many contradictory. Like, how do you cross your legs, have your hands in the air, and move at the same time?
And crawl.
Yeah, and crawl.
can't.
Crawling naturally involves all fours on the ground. So it's they just wanted to shoot someone.
Yeah, it's really fucking disturbing, dude.
Yeah. But this is
that guy
the
like
world we live
wasn't
in.
the fucking I forget the whole reason that they were even there, but he had nothing to do with it. He was just a guy in the fucking hallway when the cops rolled up.
Yeah, well, this is what happens when you give people absolute power and there's never any punishment. And
Oh,
you
and
pay
I
them
did
to go
wanna-
on administrative leave, you know.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. No, he actually did get fired for
cool.
violating department policy.
Oh, okay.
He did. And then it turns out that he needed to be employed to apply for his pension, and he was close enough to getting his pension, so they hired him back.
Okay.
With the condition in his contract that he wasn't going to do anything.
Yeah.
They were just hiring him back as a formality so he could get his pension. And he applied for fucking PTSD from the event.
Normally, you're
Which
trying
I'm
to
not gonna-
avoid paying people pension.
Right. And so, at any rate, it's just fucking tragic. And that little scene in Andor really kind of was like, that is the level of detail that they brought into this.
Yeah.
And then there's the whole thing that they're using basically prison slave labor.
Right.
There was
to
no getting
manufacture
out.
goods.
Yeah, the fact that there's actually a bureaucracy in the state of California called the Prison Industry Authority that helps oversee prisoners making things for the state of California that they use, like binders and pens and shit like that, which is
prisoner firefighters in California.
Firefighters, yep. And I think we might have had this discussion before. So anyway, that whole arc is clearly a critique of the prison industrial complex. And, you know, really kind of harsh conditions. Actually, the conditions in there are actually kind of better than they are most other places outside.
Yeah,
in terms of like they
heads.
want us fed, they want us healthy.
Yeah, yeah.
But as that clip from the Magical Carpet Company said, which is pretty obvious. It wasn't hidden in there. It was pretty explicit. That it's just to use them up until they're dead. And I'm like, that's not just prison industry. Like, that's fucking capitalism. Right?
Yeah.
Make sure you're healthy enough to fucking work. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, that's the one difference is, you know, we might not be, locked up against our will, but try to do something that someone doesn't want you to do, and you'll end up locked up. And, you know, you basically work all the time, ruin your body. You know, we always say how, oh, you're going to get to 65 or 67 or 69. Who knows, you know, what the age will be by the time we're ready to retire. And then you can stop working and enjoy yourself. I don't know how many people there are that can really enjoy, you know, the world by the time they're 65 years old. You know, their bodies are already failing. You're not going to go out and have grand adventures. You're going to stick to the beaten path and you're going to do cruises and stuff like that, which just happens to be exactly what someone who has capital would want you to do. So you end up stuck within this system, where you're like, I'd like to do adventures, but I can't because I'm too fucking old. And so you're caught, you're behind bars. They're just not as obvious.
Right. The bars are much more subtle, right? Like, yeah. And that's true. And that's not to diminish like actual, like the mass incarceration crisis or anything like that. Like, that's fucking horrendous, obviously. But like, there is kind of an element where it's like, I think of this with unhoused. It's how I kind of conceptualize the unhoused situation is that like, there's disposable people, man. Like, and that's exactly what it is. As soon as you're not useful to capital doesn't fucking need you. And if you are being antagonistic towards or otherwise a thorn in the side of capitalism, they will eliminate you. That's how this system has always worked.
Well, and we pointed out in the past that unhoused people are desired because they are a portrait of what will happen to you if you don't comply.
There is that element, but I mean, it's still disposable people, right? Their life expectancies are 15, 20 years, whatever it is, less than someone who's housed.
Yeah, it has to be. You're out in the fucking elements. It's crazy.
Yeah, exactly. At any rate, like there's so much to Andor. It's just fucking remarkable show. I love it so much.
Watch it. Subscribe to DisneyPlus.
Yeah.
I can endorse it.
I mean,
unsubscribe, once you've watched it.
Yeah, or, form a mutual aid network with people,
hang out with your friends,
and have a single login.
Do watch parties,
or do a watch party. That's even better
via OBS
with beer. Could you do a watch party via OBS?
You could absolutely do a watch party via OBS. Yeah. Well, sorry, OBS Ninja or Video Ninja is what it's called now. Yeah. You just have someone who ingests it, and then everyone who's in the meeting can maximize the screen and watch from their own computer, and then you just drink beer with each other, and you can have like, oh man, pause it, I want to talk about that real quick.
Yeah, we did one of those early in the pandemic. We watched me and some of the people in our DSA local when it still existed watched Snowpiercer. We didn't have an interactive element the way we wanted because we used some kind of plugin for Chrome that allowed you to sync a movie, but we watched Snowpiercer.
And once you know certain tools, changes everything.
Yeah. And Snowpiercer is good. I mean, as far as a fucking show, we can sit and critique,
about a dystopian future.
Yeah. And about the clear class structure and et cetera, so forth.
Yeah.
Yep. And how some people need to be able to move ahead to the other car so that everybody behind thinks they have a chance too. Yeah, and the whole purging of the population, get the poorest to fight each other.
Yeah.
But at any rate, Andor is pretty fucking woke in my opinion, and a lot of people criticize Disney under Star Wars under Disney as being woke and this, that, and the other thing, and the reality is woke is not fucking. Oh yeah, we didn't even talk about that the Rise of Skywalker women kissing thing, which made people mad. This had actually a legitimate lesbian relationship that wasn't a cliche. I don't think they fucking kissed each other at all.
No,
and they don't need to. It's the camera focusing on the gentle hand. And what's interesting too is this strong woman character that's Luthen's you want to lead, right? You said you want to lead. If you're going to do this, you need to do this. And then later, right, when the Aldani, when they were on the dam, it was she had to make the call, and she was super hesitant to do it. She was scared as fuck.
Yeah.
That shit scared because she knew the consequences were
once you go, right? And then once you go forward, turning back at that point.
Right. And then her partner being the hard, cold one that from the beginning was no, she's fucking hardcore, bro. And even in the end, it's you didn't meet me, you didn't come meet me at the baggage claim at the airport. And she's I was busy fucking tracking this motherfucker, and I'm gonna fucking stab his ass or whatever.
I got people to kill.
Yeah, exactly. I got fucking people to kill because he knew my face, basically. He had seen me. I have to fucking take him out because he's an Imperial intelligence person who knew what I looked like.
Yeah.
And it's just this kind of really, and it was kind of interesting because there was also some of that in there where Perrin, I mean, and maybe but Perrin doesn't know, right? Probably. I wasn't doing it on purpose, but that whole, like, when are you going to find a good man? Like, when she's like, and Mon Mothma knows that her cousin's a fucking lesbian or whatever.
Yeah.
But they didn't, like, it's funny.
I didn't catch it.
Sorry, go ahead.
I didn't catch that.
Oh, you didn't?
No, whoosh. or it just didn't register as important, I guess.
Oh, when Perrin mentioned her needing to get married?
No. The whole lesbian relationship.
Oh yeah, again,
Yeah.
but that's the thing. Okay, so like it's not being thrown in your face, and I guess like I could offer critique if they're doing it at the expense of wanting to show this, and then they'll fit the writing to make sure that happens.
Mm-hmm.
That's not okay. But if you're just writing people that are believable,
yeah, which seems like it's the case. Yeah,
you essentially had like this couple, and they couldn't. One was so, again, just like Perrin and Mon Mothma. One was so committed to the work that they wouldn't focus on their family, right? And then you have this kind of like, but maybe we could just take some time off or whatever. Yeah. We would go on a vacation or something. And their partner's like, we don't do that. Like, this is our life. This is what we do. We just spent, 3 months on All Danny. That place was beautiful. That doesn't count.
No.
Planning a heist or whatever. But at any rate, like, people will find reasons to complain when they don't like something. And then when they are presented with something of quality, and I guess that's my point. The problem is not that Disney is fucking woke. The problem is that they botched a couple fucking projects. And by saying cancel DisneyPlus, because it's too woke, is part of the cancel culture. You're a fucking hypocrite. You want to fucking cancel DisneyPlus because they fucking fired someone for making a fucking claiming she was a fucking Jew in the fucking Warsaw ghetto or some shit. I don't know.
Anybody who complains about someone being a snowflake is most likely themselves a snowflake.
Yeah. It's projection, right? That's fucking Freud. Those ideas go way back, and it was a phenomenon that was abundant enough to be able to describe it, right? But anyway, like, it's just, this is fucking woke on a whole nother level. The sequel trilogy never got in. You don't even understand the fucking politics.
Yeah.
And even though the original trilogy, as we've said before, like, the fucking rebels were the Viet Cong, and the Empire was the United States.
Yeah.
Like, George Lucas explicitly walked into Star Wars with, like, being like, the Viet Cong are the good guys. We're the bad guys.
Yeah.
Right? And so, like, there was always politics in Star Wars, and obviously our podcast is named with Thunderous Applause, which is an explicit reference to the politics of fucking Star Wars. Right? But Andor does it in such a fucking, god damn it, it's so good. It's so good.
I think it's thoughtful, and that probably pisses some people off too.
Yeah,
because it's not just a slog through lightsaber battles and blaster fights and everything like that. It's more akin to a soap opera.
And cameos of obscure fucking characters from
right.
like Black Chrysanthemum.
Well, and they didn't feel the need to put any old characters in order to give you the members or anything like that. You don't need member berries and everything you watch. Like, I would personally love to see a Star Wars set so far in the future that everyone's dead, and no more empires, no more Sith, no more nothing. Like, give me that. That's what I want.
You just want the black void of space. Like, it's so far in the future that
I want them to
hide its fucking heat death.
I want them to have to like put effort into building a world, as they haven't done it since the original Star Wars. Like in the prequels, they just took what had already been built, rewound time a little bit, and said that's good. In the sequel trilogies, they didn't even build the world. Like, you didn't get like what the hell the First Order was, or why the New Republic hadn't like gotten to consolidate power or anything like that. It was just the New Republic is weak. The First Order, for some reason, is very strong. And it turns out that the First Order was just there as a distraction for Palpatine to come back to power. But he actually didn't take anyone by surprise because he announced his presence. it doesn't make any fucking sense.
It makes
And
no
so-
fucking sense.
And so it was
But
a
as
terrible
far
world.
as politics in Star Wars, Andor has done it better than any of the movies. Even though Star Wars is explicitly political, as George Lucas said,
Yep.
it's war is in the name. And what is war? Did Clausewitz say? Right, Carl von Clausewitz, the theorist.
I believe it's just
Russian
hell.
military theorist. What?
Oh, are you talking about war is hell?
No. Carl von Clausewitz was a Prussian military strategist back in the day when Prussia was still a fucking thing. Right?
Oh, diplomacy by other means.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Politics, I think he says.
Yeah,
Or maybe it's diplomacy. I think it's translated from German is politics by other means.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Star Wars, it's obviously a political show, right?
Star diplomacy. Probably wouldn't sell as well.
Yeah, it wouldn't sell as well. But this show did it so much better. And I call it woke because in the sense that, like, it draws attention to systems of oppression, but also provides a roadmap for how to deal with them, talking about security culture, talking about, organizing cells in such a way to protect yourselves, conversations about technology, manifestos and ideology, and having it rooted in a basic understanding of what's wrong with the problem. That's what radical means, right?
Yep.
Like, it's a fundamental component. So in that sense, Andor's the wokest fucking Star Wars you've ever seen. And that would be a good video title. I don't know if you've titled the video yet.
I can always retitle it after it's uploaded.
Andor, wokest fucking Star Wars ever.
Probably leave out fucking. I'll put it in.
It doesn't really matter. It's kind of our thing, right? Like, if you're offended by swear words, you're not gonna like the content of this program.
That's true. And it'll draw in the crowd we like. All right, it stays in.
All right, we're gonna, I think, close off with Leadbelly singing about Scottsboro Boys, which we led off with. Scottsboro Boys, I think we did cover what happened to them.
Yes.
Basically, they were accused of rape, and it took them a while to get acquitted or released.
Yep, 6 years. All right. Well, and now the musical stylings of Leadbelly.
See you, bud.
Later.
Oh, wait.
We didn't do the sign off.
No, we didn't.
No.
Remember, when liberty dies, it dies.
With thunderous applause. And Leadbelly.
And Leadbelly. Leadbelly's fucking rad, dude.
I like it.
I actually got a whole album set of a folkways collection. It says the Moses Ash and all that other stuff. The government actually paid people during the Depression to go fucking record like artists that were just in some podunk fucking town in the middle of nowhere in Appalachia, and paid people to go there and record them and pay them for the music just so we had a catalog of what was happening.
And who says
because
we
there
can't
wasn't
employ
really a
people?
popular music press. Go ahead.
And who says we can't employ people? Apparently our government's just really shitty at thinking up jobs for people to do. That's a job. I'll do that.
I mean, some of the dioramas and shit at the history museum, American History Museum in Denver, were WPA projects.
Oh yeah,
historians and artists and shit, just to like, just do this kind of like multimedia project for teaching history.
Yeah,
because they just needed people to get a paycheck.
Yeah, and we could do that
because
again.
capitalism wasn't providing one.
Mm-hmm.
Now they don't give a shit.
Yeah,
they just
hopefully it gets to that breaking point.
Lock us up or fucking make us homeless and send the cops to beat our fucking heads.
Can't vote if you're addled in the head.
Soon they'll fucking start scooping us up with modified street sweepers and turning us into Soylent Green.
Soylent Green is people. Our music now.
All right, Leadbelly.
Later, everyone.
Go ahead and beat it out. Alabama, and you better watch out. The landlord will get you, gonna jump and shout. Gospel boys, they can tell you what it's all about. For them landlords, if they get you, boy, they gonna hang you. Go to Alabama, and you better watch out. The landlord will get you, gonna jump and shout. Gospel boys, tell you what it's all about. I'm gonna talk to a jolers, accent to listen to me.
Don't you never try to make nobody in Alabama read. Oh, the Alabama, and you better watch out. The landlord again, you're gonna jump and shout. Gospel boys, hey, what it's all about.
All right, man.
Oh, the Alabama, and you better watch out. The landlord again, you're gonna jump and shout. Gospel boys, hey, what it's all about. I'm gonna tell all the colored people, baby, don't you go here. Don't you never go to Alabama to try to live. Go to Alabama and you better watch out. The landlord again, you're gonna jump and shout. Gospel boys, hey, what it's all about. Go to Alabama and you better watch out. The landlord again, you're gonna jump and shout. Gospel boys, hey, what it's all about. Beat it out. Do it again, didn't understand you. Gospel boys, hey, what it's all about. I'm gonna tell all the colored people, even in Harlem swing. Don't you never go to Alabama to try to sing. Go to Alabama and you better watch out. Landlord again, you're gonna jump and shout. Gospel boys, hey, what it's all about. Go to Alabama and you better watch out. Landlord again, you're gonna jump and shout. Gospel boys, hey, what it's all about. Beat it out. Do it again. Gospel boys, tell you what it's all about.
Really, what